Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to Levels I Love, a little show in between shows where I have to detail one specific level I love. This time, the Kiln of the First Flame from Dark Souls.
Oh, Dark Souls, my loving God in heaven, Dark Souls. If you by any chance are a person who hasn't played the game Dark Souls, please go play Dark Souls. Seriously, what is wrong with you? As the days go by, Dark Souls is a video game that physically pains me the more and more I don't talk about it on YouTube. This is an astounding title. Truly one of the best games I've ever played in my life. And if you've listened to anyone talk about Dark Souls before, you've probably heard that 1,000 times. So what made me want to talk about Dark Souls all of a sudden now? Well, a lot of things really. Last week I put out my video Silent Hill 2 and Depression. And in that video I talked about depression. I mentioned how Silent Hill 2 was a game I like to play when I'm feeling depressed. A game that haunts me with its emptiness, its brooding atmosphere, and its dark, compelling, gritty subject matter. And in the comments section of that video, I found someone talking about Dark Souls. This commenter basically explained Dark Souls was their depression game, or at least the game that stuck with them, haunting them most due to its feeling of futility, its bleakness, and its firm power to make the person playing it feel utterly small and insignificant. And I totally fucking agree. Dark Souls to me is just like Silent Hill 2. And I've always loved it for a lot of the same reasons. Dark Souls makes you feel weak and powerless throughout the entire course of its journey. This game basically takes place at the end of the world, when everything that ever was is falling apart, and all people that were once alive are now dying dead or walking around undead.
Even now, there are only embers. And man sees not light, but only endless nights.
The world of Dark Souls is an incredibly lonely place. It's colorful, yes, but it's also dangerous and cruel. Everything's out to get you. Everyone wants to hurt you. And in the same way that Silent Hill 2 feels regretful, post-apocalyptic, and lifeless, Dark Souls feels ruined. While the game is certainly full of life forms and people moving about and engaging you in conversation, ambush, and battle, the world itself usually feels quiet. Most of the places you're exploring are merely just ruins of once great mighty civilizations, and most of the enemies you're taking on are corrupt undead versions of their former selves, monsters who used to be good people.
Oh, my dear sister, don't mind me. It does not hurt terribly.
The whole thing feels sad, and there are a billion scenes I could point out that get deep under my skin. But the Kiln hits me the hardest.
Warning! I am about to spoil the ending of Dark Souls. Don't keep watching if you don't want me to spoil the ending of Dark Souls. Seriously. So at the ending of Dark Souls, after you collect all the Lord Souls and beat every necessary boss in the game, you open a doorway that leads to a staircase. A white staircase, covered in mist, with ghostly apparitions of dead knights slowly fading from left to right. Beyond this staircase is the game's final level, the Kiln of the First Flame. And God, is it beautiful. This has got to be one of the coolest looking final levels I've ever seen in a game. First of all, the ground is just like a thick, wavy carpet of ash. The structures that stand are all broken, crooked, and singed by fire. And that dim, brooding sunset hangs over the level like a final light, like the last glowing ember of a flame that's just barely about to go out. Which is kind of what's actually happening. According to this game's lore, this place was meant to contain and protect the First Flame, guarded by Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight. The First Flame is basically a fire that keeps the world from being consumed by darkness. If the First Flame ever goes out, the last flame goes out, and the world will be enveloped by an endless black abyss. So where's the First Flame now? Well, when you get to the Kiln, it looks like it must have burned out already. The Kiln is completely covered in ash. All you see are white dunes, dead bodies, and a great deal of black charry burnt stone. But as you keep walking forward, eventually you'll come to a ledge. And if you look over the ledge, you'll see a glimpse of something burning softly and weakly below. Could that be it? Could that be all that's left of the First Flame? Well, keep going down and you'll find a door. And behind that door, the final boss of the game will be waiting. Now the final boss is Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight. And you know, just judging from the intro of the game, I was expecting Gwyn to be terrifying. The beginning of the game basically talks Gwyn up as this powerful, mighty god that radiates with greatness, battles dragons, and throws thunder from his hands. And honestly, I was expecting him to really intimidate me. With all the bosses you have to fight in Dark Souls, all the giant, frightening, monstrous bosses stacked up all throughout the game, I figured Gwyn would have to be massive. I pictured him being this colossal, muscular king, sitting on a throne atop a massive tower, throwing things down at me from high above, or something crazy like that. But no, what do you see when you walk through that door? When you walk through the final door, you see a man roughly the same size as you, running at you in fear, desperately trying with the last of his strength to protect a tiny, pathetic little flame in the center of the room. And you hear the saddest music ever. This tore me to shreds when I first saw it. Rather than Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, his name at the bottom of the screen reads Gwyn, Lord of Cinder. The sad thing about this fight is that he's basically just struggling. He's using what's left of his soul and all his energy to keep you away. He wants to prevent you from getting near the flame, prevent you from putting it out and possibly ending the world. And the crazy thing is, you actually can put it out and end the world. It's such a moving scene for a video game. Such a moving concept for a final, ultimate showdown boss fight. It's almost anticlimactic, but in a good way. And it represents what probably is this game's greatest strength. Wordless storytelling. Just through images, just through music, visuals, and gameplay. This ending is telling you a story. It's telling you a story of pain, of hardship. It's the last fight for humanity. And it's nothing epic or explosive for this game. Instead, it's something rather dreary. And you know what's even more dreary? The actual endings. In one ending, if you choose to light the fire, you give your soul and body to the flame, prolonging the inevitable darkness and keeping things burning for just a little while longer. You also die. In the other ending, if you don't choose to light the fire, you begin the Age of Dark, becoming the Dark Lord and being bowed down to by a line of primordial serpents.
True dark be cast upon the world.
At first, you might see this ending as good. I mean, Gwyn's dead, and you're like the king of the world now. Plus, if you talk to Darkstalker Koth, a quiet serpent lurking in the abyss, he tells you that Gwyn is a treacherous, cowardly, power-hungry liar who's been preventing the Dark Age for years. And he also tells you that the Age of Dark is actually the Age of Man. So, by killing Gwyn, you're beginning the Age of Man, right? Well, not exactly. You're letting the world be consumed by darkness. And just by looking at what Koth has already done to the land of Ulasil, it's obvious that darkness is not something humans or the world itself can thrive on for long. The ending of Dark Souls has always been open to interpretation, but it seems to me this Dark Age is the beginning of the end. Darkness will turn us into monsters. And after all, we're not exactly a human in this game. We're an undead. We're an anti-human. A zombie. A monster, basically. And what do we see at the end of the dark ending? We don't see humans bowing down to us. We see monsters bowing down to us. And that's what's so depressing about Dark Souls. This game is basically a big, beautifully tragic depiction of the end. It's a depiction of hopelessness. It's almost like a reminder that no matter what happens, you're going to die. Everyone's going to die. It's a cynical ending, and it's one of the most haunting conclusions to any game I've ever played.
Speaking of depressing endings and depressing games, we still need to talk about Off by Mortis Ghost. But first I need to finish Silent Hill Month.
Oh God.